Now I'm also going to press the record button, and then I'll do the start webinar.
All right. We good? All right. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Indo-American Community Services, I would like to welcome you to the Executive Connect event here. Great to see everyone here. I am Sumit Dangi from the Indo-American Community Services, or ISCS Executive Board. I am the Global CFO and Treasurer at Julius Mutual Group. ISCS mission is to increase diversity in workplaces and provide a premier professional development and networking platform. We do have multiple chapters throughout the country in major cities like Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, etc. ISCS hosts annual leadership conferences and entrepreneurship conferences, women leadership events, virtual career expos, young leadership programs, student internship programs, and mentoring programs to foster leadership. We are excited to host this year's leadership conference. The overall conference theme is Must Win Battles. We have many diverse corporate executives speaking at this conference. We are hosting 6 sessions over 3 Fridays and look forward to having you all join us throughout the event. This session is, as I'm kicking it off, we have our keynote speaker here, Mike Jakowski, CEO of Duck Creek Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar solutions provider to property and casualty insurance industry, something that I'm pretty familiar with. Mike is a celebrity in our circles, if you will. Mike has had an amazing career holding multiple leadership positions at Accenture, Allstate, and now as CEO of Duck Creek Technologies. Mike has abundant experience working on the consulting side, working with private equity firms, and has recently taken his company public during the pandemic. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Mike. Mike, it would be great to hear from you, your experiences, and a little bit introduction on Duck Creek as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sumit. And I just want to say thank you to the Indo-American Community Services for just thinking of me for this keynote on this very important leadership conference and a great topic and great theme of must-win battles. And I thought before I get into a little bit of my background in Duck Creek, I just want to make some comments about IACS and really how this great work and this vision and platform is serving all of you, but also what it means to me. First off, the vision of establishing a strong and diverse platform to connect present and future leaders, through offering various programs. I'll just say that this is very near and dear to my heart. For me personally, working very closely with Indo-American leaders and people from India is just positively impacted my personal career, and I'd say in a very, very profound way. The journey for me started more than 24 years ago when I was with Accenture and working with many in India and many that came over from India to really help us on a technology agenda. And then it also continued through Allstate, working very closely with many folks from India and, within America. And that's where I met our now CTO, and you're going to hear from him in a later keynote, in a later topic on technology, Nag Vaidyanathan. And Nag and I worked very, very closely together. And I'll just say this investment from the organization into leaders and people so that we can get more people of diversity in leadership roles is fantastic. And, it's any way that I can continue to help and serve this great cause, I'm here for the whole organization. So I'm very, very honored to be here. So I thought, first I'd just start with a little bit of perspective on me. So you kind of know some of my passions and what makes me tick, and then I'd go into the business a little bit. I'll say that Duck Creek is a very personal business of mine. I got a long history with the company, but most notably, I'm one of the lead architects of the claim software that we bring to market today. And I still remember back in the days, coding till 2 a.m. and sleeping under a desk. It was really my passion to develop software in the industry. And then along that journey, I ended up leaving Accenture and going to Allstate, as Sumit noted. And there I led a very large technology and business transformation and also met Nag Vaidyanathan. And, it was interesting because I was actually a customer of the software that I built. So I had to build it. And then when I was over at Allstate, I had to install it and run it and scale it. And I learned a ton. And while I was at Allstate, I moved out of technology and then went over and ran a portion of their distribution business. So if you ever see the Good Hands Allstate agency signs, I was responsible for many dimensions of that distribution channel. So it was really the first time I moved from being a technology leader into a business leader. But then now coming back to Duck Creek, for those of you that don't know Duck Creek Technologies, just a little bit of context. We're a technology company, and specifically, we provide SaaS core solutions for the insurance industry. We're very, very proud to serve the property and casualty insurance industry. It's an industry that what we see, it's very, very vital for protecting people and protecting families and protecting businesses. I once worked for a leader over at Allstate that called insurance the oxygen of free enterprise. And what he meant by that is, innovation is really driven by people taking some kind of calculated risk, whether they're going to develop a new product or open a new business or build a large football stadium. And in order to take risks, we need some kind of backstop. And the insurance industry is here to allow us to take those types of risks and have a backstop behind those risks. I even think about how many of us would let our children drive our cars if our net worth was at risk every single day. And obviously, driving cars gives us a freedom to move about and do the things that we need to do in life. So, we're very proud to serve this vital industry. Duck Creek, we're a leading SaaS provider of technology solutions. So think of us as the core platform of the ERP of an insurance carrier. We're most known for policy, billing, and claims. And without getting into the complexity of it, just a simple thing to think about is if you purchase a policy, an insurance policy from Geico Insurance, the policy document that you receive and the bills that you receive and all the receivables are all done in our software. So that's just a way that if you're not in insurance, maybe you can relate for that. And then we have a single platform that scales to insurers of all sizes, large carriers, insurance carriers like AIG, Liberty Mutual. I mentioned Geico, Progressive is also a carrier, all the way down to small mid-market carriers throughout the regions. And we're really proud of the platform that we have that can scale to carriers of all sizes. And our mission is simply to empower insurers to reimagine the future of insurance. So, in short, just think of us as a technology provider that helps insurance carriers undergo a digital transformation throughout their business. So that's about it on my intro, Sumit. Just a little bit of background on me and Duck Creek.
Yeah, no, really, really appreciate it. For all of our viewers here, right? So we have over 300 registrations and people are watching across live stream, YouTube, social media, Zoom, etc. Right? And the way we'll conduct the session is as questions come up with our viewers, right? They can send it over to you or I directly, and we'll address it. So we'll just keep it light and less structured, right? So all of our viewers, please do submit your questions right via chat. And send it over to me. I'll kick off with a couple of questions, right? So first is perhaps, right, tell us about your journey from going from a private company to public company, your experiences, your learnings, etc. I know you are an avid reader and you are a continuous learner, right? That's how you that's what you talk about yourself. So would love to learn what you've learned through that journey.
Sumit, thank you for asking that question. And I think the first statement I'd like to make on that is all of us, and I know this is why you're all tuning into this session, we're all lifelong learners and want to learn new things. And here I am, a CEO of a company, 53 years old, and I will tell you, it is amazing what I have learned over the last several years, most notably when we carved our business out from Accenture, but then took the company public. And I just learned so many new things along the way. So, I think my message is we never stop learning. And I think that's what makes life so fun, is just having new experiences. But back to your question, there's really two significant events with Duck Creek. The first one was when we carved out from Accenture and became an independent company. And then the second one is after a lot of growth, we ended up taking the company public. And, my background and history, as I started with my intro, is really one of an industry expert, somebody that has a passion for both insurance and technology, but running independent companies and certainly taking them public was not something that I had history doing. And I think it's for all, future leaders out there and emerging leaders out there, I think the one thing I will say on that topic is whenever I found myself growing or taking a little bit of a risk on a new role, what I always did was build on the platform of the experience that I had that served as a foundation to then stretch myself to learn something new. So let's just start with that first inflection point. When I moved, carved the business out from Accenture into an independent company. Well, the private equity firm that bought our company, Apex Partners, a wonderful private equity partner, they really committed and said, Mike, you are best to lead this company as CEO when we become an independent company. And remember, I was an Accenture employee before that. And the reason why they said that is because I had so much industry depth. I knew the technology better than most. I really wanted to invest in culture and people. And there's a lot that I knew about the business. But they also knew that they could surround me with leaders that really knew how to form an independent company. So we hired a new CFO to the business, somebody that had experience of carving out businesses, growing them, scaling them, and taking them through transition. He served as my right-hand partner. So I learned a lot. Questions around corporate governance and managing risk. How do we really set up, the back office properly to scale with the company? And, it was just amazing how I was able to take these these skills that I had in the past, use them as a foundation, but then learn new things. And then we scaled the business quite well. And then, we had a lot of success. And during the pandemic, as Sumit noted, we took the business public. I had never taken a business public before or even run a public company as a CEO. And with that, we surrounded ourselves, again, we had a CFO that had done it, but then some great banking partners that have been through it. I set up my own mentorships with with CEOs that have run public companies and gone through the transition and worked very, very closely with them. And I had kind of a world of trusted advisors around me. So this is where I would say to everybody that's watching, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness for ask for help. What you can do is say, look, I have something to give here, but maybe if I have something that I need to learn, you can surround yourself with people, ask for help in those people, from people, and learn those new skills. And that's really what happened when we went public. Corporate governance, how do we pick a syndicate? How do we go through a banking process with investors? How do I do quarterly earnings calls and talk to investors afterwards? And this is where my advisors really helped me with all the right things to do through that process. And you can just imagine how much I learned through that process.
Wow, that's really humble, but I should say kudos to you, right? Just recognizing the gaps that you had despite being an extremely successful CEO, right? And then filling those gaps with right people, bringing in right advisors, etc. So a big lesson for me actually there. So just shifting gears a little bit, right? What significant changes to priorities pre and dare I say post pandemic, right? Across people, process, technologies.
Yeah, it's some of the most significant changes that we have. The first comment I'm going to say is I feel very blessed to be part of an industry that seemed to be impacted much less than other businesses or other areas like travel and entertainment through the pandemic, right? I think for a second, I think it's important to all rewind ourselves back to early 2020 when the pandemic settled in. And if you remember, there was so much uncertainty, Sumit, like so much uncertainty. If you remember, we went into lockdown, we couldn't leave our houses, we thought the world was going to stop. We were very fortunate at Duck Creek that our business didn't stop. And I think some of it was insurance carriers. They went, and you went through this at Jewelers. They had to send their claim adjusters home and their underwriters home and all of their staff home. And a lot of their technology and systems were not set up well. And we being a cloud-based, web-based platform, it seemed like the interest of actually moving from legacy technologies or desktop-based technologies into web and cloud-based technologies grew as a result of the pandemic. So we tended to do pretty well through it. And then I'm just going to make a side comment, and then I want to come back to your question on priorities. I was really inspired by humanity throughout the pandemic. I think people really rose to the occasion of the unknown. And I think one great example, you can even look at it on YouTube or whatever, but if you remember, there was a time in New York City when healthcare workers would change shifts and they would come out of the hospital like at 8 p.m. Everyone would come out of their apartments and they would applaud them as they all walked through. And when you see humanity behaving that way, it just inspires you around how great people genuinely are down to their core. And that really helped me. And I think now I'm going to bridge that into the biggest change in our priorities at Duck Creek. And I will say it was around talent. It was around the way that we thought about talent, recruited talent, retaining talent. And what I think really happened is people's ideas of success changed. I think people took a moment to go relook at values, to look at family. I mean, I'm a recipient of this. I have three grown daughters, 25, 23, and 21 today, but I was an empty nester and they're all out of the house. And during the pandemic, they all came home. And we actually had some others come home with us too. Like everybody came home and we all had this time together. And I think it was a time that we all asked ourselves, well, what does success in life look like? And in a world where we're all overworking, we're all over traveling, et cetera, I think it changed some things. And then what came after that was what we call the Great Resignation, people changing jobs, moving around. And I think at Duck Creek, we really sat back and asked ourselves, what do we really need to do by way of our talent? How do we work together? What's expected? And we can talk a little bit about that. But I'll just say as a company, we really changed the amount that we're of energy, time, and resources we are investing in DE&I, culture, leadership, people. And that just became the number one agenda item as we went through the pandemic.
Wow, that's it. So for our viewers, right, who might not know, yeah, congratulations, right? You guys just got awarded for Best Global Culture along with the Best Leadership Team and the Best CEO for Diversity. So I think those results paid off, or that hard work paid off really well.
Yeah.
So what's the secret that you can share with the people here, right? In terms of building strong teams and aligning them on I know you have very strong goals, very strong priorities, right? How do you build the team and then take them all along the same journey, right? Especially in this new virtual hybrid onshore, offshore. I know you have a pretty large offshore presence as well. How do you do it?
We do. And, I think, boy, how do you do it? I think the first thing is really be intentional and invest in your culture. And when I say in your culture, I talk a lot about, and I think there's some questions in here, Sumit, for us to explore, but I always talk a lot about the why, the what, and the how, right? Like, why do we do what we do? What do we need to achieve together as goals and priorities? And then how do we do our work and what's expected? And I think for me, it is really spending very deliberate time on defining what those mean for your team, for the organization, and for everybody throughout the organization. So how do you do it? You be very intentional. You have to invest your time. So when we go look at even our culture and some of the things that we're very proud of around our diversity, it is not only invest in the time from the leadership, but make sure that you have a certain amount of investment in the company. So we hired a director who runs diversity, equity and inclusion, as well as our culture initiatives. The second thing is define your values and define your culture code. How do people do their best work? What's expected for how they do their work? I think it's really important that you write it down, right? You write it down so you can really share it. So at Duck Creek, we have a document that we call, is a kind of think of a 36-page, white paper. We call it the flight path. And the flight path is Duck Creek's guide to realizing our brilliant future as unified ducks. We call ourselves ducks. And with that, when you define your core values and you define your culture code, I would say that you use them all the time. You use them around how you recognize people, you do it against your values. You use it when you write an internal article, try to express things against your values. In your end of year evaluations, try to do that in context of your values, or even in informal conversations, right? When things come up and you're recognizing somebody or you're talking with somebody, you say, wow, that was a great example of these things. But then with the leadership team around that, I think once you can get specific and write it down, make sure that you're hiring people that align to those values. And I think we've all been there where we've had people that have come into an organization that just don't seem to be aligned with the values, and it can be a little bit destructive. So you have to pay attention to that and have the courage to make changes if people aren't. And then I don't know if there's a further question you want to dive into on this, but I think it's really important that you spend the time, really being clear on your objectives, your SMART goals, your priorities, getting alignment with the leadership team, and then really cascading that down thoughtfully. And I don't know if that's something you want to, explore further, but that's just the way that I see it.
No, I love it, right? So perhaps, right, let's take a step back and let's think about priorities, right, or strategic priorities. And then also the connection to the mission and vision, right, of the company. But there are opportunities all around us, right? And how do you look at these competing priorities and think around, hey, these are the must-win battles, right? What are the top 3, 4, etc.? And then I will give you a sneak peek of the follow-up question, which is how do you align your team to the same thing, right? So
okay,
they're not going in different directions.
Yeah, I might go for a little bit of time on this one because this is important. But look, I think prioritization is everything. And I think all of us as leaders can associate to times where we got so many things going on, our hairs have been on fire, and my wife sometimes tells me, Mike, you have so many priorities, you have no priorities, right? Like she's used that, statement with me because you try to make everybody happy. And so prioritization is everything. But before I get into how I prioritize, I do want to highlight what I would consider to be the biggest priority. And the biggest priority for me is the why. Before you prioritize the what we're going to do, what we're going to invest in, I think it's really important to make sure the why is understood. And what do I mean by that? Either at a company level or even a team level, have a purpose, make it worthwhile for the whole team or the whole organization to rally behind the priorities. We at Duck Creek, we really want to make a lasting impact on people, families, and businesses. And I keep saying to our team, if we could just take 1% of expense, and you can relate to this, Sumit, and move it to indemnification in the world, that would be a $1.6 billion impact of restoring people's lives, rebuilding their homes, paying their medical bills. 1.6 billion. If we could just get 1% of efficiency out of that. Now that's a big goal, but how many people can come into work and say, I have an opportunity to make that kind of contribution? Another great example, I'm going to ask the audience to please tune in to Aziz Mohammed, CEO of Covanta. Covanta has defined their why. They are leading sustainability. And in that, they're fostering environmental justice programs and fighting climate change. There's not a more worthy cause. That is a worthy cause that's out there. So now, once the why is defined, then in prioritizing the what, how do we go about that? And it's a very timely discussion for us because our fiscal year starts on September 1st. So it just starts in less than a week for us. So we are in the midst of finalizing that overall annual planning process for us. And here's the way that we look at it. We first look at what are the key differentiators of Duck Creek and how are we going to leverage them to drive our long-term and midterm plan. It does start with ducks. We have decided that our talent, our people, our ducks is the number one priority. And we're going to make those investments and make sure we protect those investments, because without great people, you're not going to create the best products and et cetera. But then from there, what we did is we really defined these three pillars where we're focusing in on our 3 to 5 year strategy. The first one is our organic business. And what do I mean by our organic business? The current products and current markets that we're in. How do we do a better job with our success in the market, our impact to customers, our ability to cross-sell into customers, take care of our customers, and grow that overall business? And we have a certain growth expectation through it. Then from there, we're looking at new avenues of growth. So think of this as not your current markets and products, but your new products, your new markets, new partners you can work with. And what's your expectation to drive that growth? And then overall, we look at our profitability goals. What can we afford to do? Where do we create value for shareholders? Where do we need to focus? And so as we go through all of those and create alignment, it's just really about aligning those objectives and then figuring out the top priorities that'll move the needle on your business.
Wow, perfect. Let me switch gears a little bit, right? And we have audience questions coming in. So here is one, right? What has been the transformation challenges that you have had to build and scale the product set?
Yeah, I think that the transformation challenges to build and scale the product set for us is, I think the biggest challenges is, we did a very, very aggressive migration to the cloud. So when you pivot from an on-premise company into a cloud company, you got to think about new skills. You have to think about new capabilities. And this is where bringing in, you have to make sure that you protect and preserve the knowledge and the institutional knowledge that got you to where you are. At the same time, you have to bring in some new talent that really understand the new technologies, the new ways that you're going to focus in on things. And I think, for us, the challenges is always the balancing of the new talent and the existing talent and making sure that you have a very cohesive team moving forward. And again, I'm going to probably do this continuously throughout this presentation, but that does go back to culture. What is your culture? What do you expect of your culture? And are you hiring people that are adopting your culture? And then beyond just the skill set and transforming to be an on-prem company into a cloud-based company, also we've acquired a couple of companies, and the way that we think about acquisition is on the product set. We want to acquire industry leaders in their segment. So we just acquired a company that is the absolute industry leader for reinsurance management. And they're by far, it's the best technology that's out there. And now we're in the midst of integrating all of that into our core assets and pulling that together. But again, you have to do a lot of work on change management and your culture and looking at the solutions to go integrate that. So a lot of focus on people and change, which normally when you talk about product set, people just want to talk about technology, programming languages, and technology stacks. But I think it's as much about people and culture as well.
So how do you think about just building on the culture, right? How do you ensure that culture isn't just words on paper, or mission and vision isn't just words on paper, right? That you do an exercise once a year, once every 3 years or so on, right? And you
Yeah.
hire a consultant and do all that stuff, and then you put it aside. But how do you make it a living, breathing thing on a continuous basis, right? So I I I heard you talk about hiring the right people with the right mindset, if you will. Are there other things, right, in your decision-making process where do people feel comfortable saying this does not align with their values? Like, give me examples, right, if you can.
Sure. A couple of things, some that I already mentioned, make sure you write it down, make sure it's clearly communicated what you expect, right? Because that's kind of your baseline. But also, I talk a lot about it's not just what we achieve and accomplish, it's how our people do it. And I hope everybody listening can look in their career and see great leaders that they're inspired by and they would love to work for. And you use these words like, oh, I would follow that leader anywhere and even to another company, right? We've all worked for those people. Okay. And then we've all worked, maybe not all of us, I hope not all of us, but have perhaps worked for a leader that maybe was known to get a great result, but really didn't have great behaviors or didn't align with the culture, but they still got a great result. And I think one of the biggest statements you can do on your culture is if you have people that are known as high performers, but do not match your culture, you have to have the courage to ask them to leave the organization. And, and I think that says a lot. It says a lot around what we're going to tolerate as an organization. And we've been through that. We've been through people that are really smart, really, get stuff done, but you could tell just not aligned with the culture and you would move. And I think that's one thing that people just take note. People will always take note that if your high performers get a hall pass on the culture, if they get a hall pass on the culture, then the organization doesn't. It's just words on a page, Sumit, right?
That's right.
And I think it's important that you're very intentional on that. And then also, as I said, use your culture code, use your core values as part of the fabric of how you speak to your team and how you speak to your organization. And that's highlighting good things that have happened and it's highlighting bad things that have happened, right? We're not taking care of our customer and that's one of our values. And this is what we got to go do. And I think that's really what keeps it a breathing thing, as opposed to words on a page that get revisited once every year, every 3 years.
Wow, and especially as you said about courage, right? It's not easy. It's not easy to let go of people who are performing really well. Just not and have the right skill set, but just not the right mindset, right? It does take courage, and especially around hiring, right? Basically, I'll just continue on the people theme for a second, right? But I think that's what we should all be talking about as leaders. So around hiring, how are you addressing the challenges, right? Onshore, offshore, with the great resignation that you talked about, etc. Has there been different sources that you are now being open to, different work styles, locations, right? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, and the way that we're thinking about our hiring, I'd say the most significant thing that we have changed is, as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we've really done a lot more to relook at our sources of hiring. Okay. We have made it a goal within the company that for every hire outside that we bring in the company, we're not hitting diversity targets per se. We want to be known as hiring the best person with the best skills for the job, but we're really working hard on the diversity in the company, people of color, certainly gender diversity as well. And we're really being intentional on the investments that we're making there. And one requirement for Duck Creek and hiring is what we call the hiring slate. These are the candidates, and we will not let a position get filled without having a diverse slate, because there are so many amazing people that are out there, right? And we want to build a culture where we're playing a role in making sure that we're looking at diversity, because if you don't look at diversity, then you're never going to hire diversity. The other thing that we've done is we put an enormous amount of investment in our employee resource groups. And these are very organically built. They have leads or volunteer times. And these are, ERGs that are really focused on diversity within the organization. The caregivers ERG, which is mostly mothers, but let's not say that mothers are the only caregivers. And that's why, there's a lot of passion around caregivers, because some of us have aging parents, some of us have different conditions. And how do we have a work environment that caters to the needs of caregivers, working mothers, people that are, trying to balance their family needs and getting their kids to school or take care of aging parents? And look, with this group here in Indo-Americans, like, what I love is the family values of Indo-Americans, and parents always very close to many people. And how do we have a culture that caters to that, right? So I think that's a great example. And so we have our ERGs playing a role in hiring, because we want to make sure that we're conveying as a company that, hey, we have a work from anywhere policy. That's to help you as a caregiver if you do have an aging, elderly parent that's living with you and some needs there. And so our ERGs are helping us through the hiring process. They're helping us with the right things to focus on diversity. And I think that's been really beneficial. And then the final comment I'll make is I'm really proud that our retention rates have been much higher than the industry average. I believe it's because of our great people and the investment in our culture and some of these things around DE&I as well.
Wow. That's great to hear, right? As every company, every industry is struggling. It's just good to get diverse perspective, right, on how every leader is handling it. Let me shift the gears a little bit here, right? And let me ask you around some customer expectations, right? So what are the big pressures that you're facing, right? So from your customers, the Geicos and the Progressives and Liberty Mutual, as they are trying to basically move towards being more customer centric to the end consumer, right? So yours is a B2B product, right? For all of our listeners, but you're ultimately serving the end customer. What kind of pressures? What are the changes? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, and first, let me just highlight the domain of the problem. And you're highlighting a very important items to me. It is, if you go look at the insurance industry, it is behind the rest of the world in terms of its ability to respond to customer expectations. There are a lot of legacy platforms that are out there. You'd be amazed with how much of this industry still runs on mainframes, that has batch, that has green screens. Not everybody knows what that is, but if you're a technologist, you do. It's just really old technology, is the way that I would say it. And we go look at customer expectations and think about how much our lives have changed over the last decade. Things like we used to watch, movies with VHS tapes and CDs, and now, you expect to stream everything. And you expect to stream it right away and have access to right away. And, that's really important. And then when I think about, Uber and how fast now you can dial a ride and get to where you're going. And to me, it's not even about the digital experience of being able to secure a ride. But I think one thing I talk a lot about is transparency to the customer. What makes Uber so much better for me than calling a taxi cab is not that it's easy and I can push a button, and that is a big part of it, yes. But also I can see exactly where that car is, and I can see if it's 10 minutes away or 5 minutes away or 3 minutes away. Where if I just got on the phone and called a taxi, I really don't know when they're going to arrive, right? Think about that transparency that customers are having. Think about, you know exactly where the package is when you order it off of Amazon. Well, then you go to insurance when it's running on legacy systems. And, we're trying to, provide more real-time transparency. So if I add a driver, what does my new bill look like? What are my rates going to be? If I submitted this claim, what would my rates look like? And because so much of this industry operates behind the scenes in what we call batch, and think of batch as something that happens asynchronously later on, it's really difficult for insurance carriers to respond to those immediate needs to their customers. So, a lot of it is just keeping up and to customer expectations. It's pretty interesting when we're in a world of digital technologies where we do an e-signature on everything, but an insurance company is still sending you a lot of mail and a lot of things that you might have to sign and send back, as opposed to, all digitally and electronically done. So we're all about, kind of modernizing that. And then, on top of that, a lot of the pressures that we're also seeing beyond just that consumer experience is many, many insurers are facing immense cost pressures. And this is really related to the supply chain issues that we're seeing and inflationary issues that we're seeing. So, what happens in our industry is when costs go up. So think about used cars and new car costs and prices have gone up quite significantly over the last couple of years. Car parts have gone up. So now if you get in an accident or if you total your car and you need to get a new car, that's a lot more expensive today than it was several years ago. And one issue with insurance is it's a regulated industry. So you have to file with the states in order to get more premium or rates into your product. So there's a lag behind when the inflation catches insurance carriers and they can actually recoup that in rates from their customers. And that puts profitability pressure on them. So we have a lot of insurers that are asking us, how can we be more agile? How can we use analytics and advanced, technologies and artificial intelligence to be more predictive of some of these overall trends like loss costs and costs going up? And then also, how can we be much more efficient of taking rates? When we say taking rates, that really means raising prices. But how can we be more efficient at getting price increases into our products and getting them to market and managing the life cycle of that? So we do a lot on that. And, I will say that, this is a really big item. As I said, it relates to the supply chain. It's also why I'm thrilled that IACS has this session on supply chain that's coming up as part of this overall leadership series. So I think that's going to be a great topic for everyone to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, right? So just building on the theme, have you seen any changes in trend in terms of what the end consumer is expecting from their insurance carriers, right? Like, can I just pick up my phone and how much time do I want to put in? How much details, right? Or can't you actually just get all that detail from other places?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. There's a trend where consumers want to interact with their insurance carrier very differently. I will say this though, because in the insurance market, people don't have a claim every year and they don't interact with their insurance company every year. So it's not quite as acute as it was like during the pandemic when we just took on digital ordering of food or takeout and we wanted to just do it right away. But there is this constant pressure where consumers are leaving companies that can't update their technology and can't show transparency of their bill, change their policy online, have a mobile app to go have access to it. That's going to be really, really important. I would say the most notable trend, though, that we are seeing as a result of the pandemic is just an explosion on what we call usage-based insurance. And I'm going to call them new, more contemporary insurance products in the industry. I would say that is something that is much more acute. And why is that? Throughout the pandemic, people drove less, they drove differently. Now I think a usage-based product, people want to pay for what they're using. And I think that's just kind of a mindset now and a culture that's setting in. So I think that's imposing a lot more demand. And it's not just tied to automobile insurance. but it's tied to many other things as well, just kind of on a more usage-based model. But then I think even beyond that, we're seeing new products get born out of need. What do I mean by that? Cyber insurance is probably the fastest growing segment of insurance, just because there's so much risk. There's so many bad actors out there that are trying to steal people's information, and people are trying to figure out how to better protect themselves, and companies are trying to find better ways to protect themselves. So that's been an increasing trend. And then there's a huge increase in trend in terms of commercial products. How do I have professional liability products that are really tailored to a segment of the market, or can manage a virtual workforce? I mean, outsourcing many functions within a company is an increased item. And what impact does that have in your liability insurance and your directors and officers and errors and omissions insurance? So there's just a lot around that in terms of the trends that we're seeing.
Yep. No, thank you for that. So, well, on a lighter note, right, on future of technology, bots and robots taking over the world, or is there a happy medium there somewhere?
Well, taking over the world, right? I think it's a relevant question this time of AI and the way that machine learning and artificial intelligence and bots and robots, I think technology is only going to accelerate. And anyone that's ever taken the time to watch some of these old movies like The Terminator, where technology took over the world, it is, sometimes you look at it and say, are we going to lose control of any of all of this? And is there a happy medium on here? And look, I say there is a happy medium, but we have to define it, right? It is going to accelerate. It is going to keep going. And, I'm also a firm believer that the human mind is the most unimaginable, remarkable thing in the world, right? And we just keep inventing more efficient ways to do things. But the human mind always has context. We always have context around what's happening. And I think we've got to take the time to really understand, where do computers, bots, and everything have their role, and where do humans have their role? And I think there is a happy medium, but we just have to go find it, just like we have in the past through the Industrial Revolution and everything else. But I think it's important that we're very mindful in terms of what we're investing in and how it's going to impact us.
Perfect, right? So, hey, questions are coming in, right? So I'll read out the next question, which is, how would your product line or product set, right, evolve to accommodate the change in marketplace? Sure.
Well, the first major evolution for us was a very aggressive pivot to the cloud, as I noted earlier. And one reason why we got after that very early, we started that journey probably in about 2014, 2015, is because what was very important for me is to embrace just this overwhelming investment that's being done by companies like Amazon and AWS and Microsoft and Azure and Google. I mean, they are investing billions and billions of dollars across a landscape. And I don't know how many people are watching have ever had an opportunity to go tour one of these modern data centers, like a Microsoft Azure data center. Many of us maybe have seen pictures of data centers or been in data centers, but when you go into these new data centers that are driving the cloud, it is the most remarkable thing you'll ever see. The amount of investment, and now making them green, making them, returning carbon back, and just the way that they're thinking about it. But the other thing that I think is so remarkable is I say that there are things we can do today with 10 lines of code that used to take us thousands of lines of code, many years ago. So incorporating those technologies, these are things like, I'll give you an example, what we call Elasticsearch. Maybe if we use old applications, we're familiar with, a screen that you put in a bunch of criteria and then you hit the search button. And that was one way to do it. And now everybody wants everything to look like Google, where you're typing something in and it's just kind of slowly prompting what should come up. And there was a time where applying that type of search technology was really expensive and it was really hard because you had to go figure it out. And now with these cloud technologies, I'm not going to say it's completely easy, but the barriers are so much lower. So I think accommodating cloud native technologies, incorporating those is very, very important. And then for us as a vertical software provider, again, we're on the lookout for the leading assets in the industry that are highly complex, that solve very complicated business problems for insurance carriers, like reinsurance, like I just mentioned. And how do we make them part of the portfolio and then have them fully integrated with our suite to bring them to the market? So that's really the way that we think about the product line and the product set. But we also have Nag Vaidyanathan joining us on a topic on technology on September 2nd. So you can also ask him that question.
Perfect. Thank you. So what's been your biggest significant learnings, right, as a leader during the pandemic, etc., right? Like, what are those key insights for our listeners here, right,
Yeah.
as they are trying to know you?
I don't want to sound redundant, but maybe I'll just put a little more detail on the point. Is I would say the most significant learning for me is about people, about how people relooked at their values. They asked, what is success for me? And my family, perhaps, where we're in a world where I think we're just driving so hard to try to find business success and outcomes, et cetera. And I think the pandemic gave the world a moment to pause and reflect and sit at the dinner table with their families more. And so with that, now I would just say that everybody who's joined us today, it's my hope and my genuine hope that you're a leader or you're on your way to great leadership positions and you're here because you want to learn new leadership skills and capabilities. And, I would just say to all of you is, you really take the time to understand what your teams and your people and the people that work with you and around you value, and genuinely try to cater to those values. And those can be at a team level, but they can be really at an individual level. Sometimes the smallest acknowledgement, knowing, perhaps that somebody is struggling through something and that you're there to help. And, on that, there's a lifelong lesson that I learned once, and it was when I was in a presentation that Southwest Airlines leadership team came and presented to me. And Southwest Airlines is just it's a pretty remarkable company, but they have a mantra in the company. It's the leadership mantra is we work for our people. So a leader, a manager works for our people. They don't work for me, I work for them, right? And if you kind of flip it upside down, and when you say you work for your people, suddenly you start going, oh, what do my people, what do they value as an individual? What do we value as a team? And how do I help eliminate those roadblocks? How do I help my people do their best work, or maybe even reach their own ambitions in life? And sometimes, I've had people that work for me that I've helped find a job somewhere else. I've helped them actively because I couldn't fulfill their ambition. And I knew that they had an opportunity, because we didn't have an open role or something like that, but there was an opportunity elsewhere. And you know what? Can you imagine what kind of lifelong relationships you build when you do things like that? You create this authentic bond because people start to really learn you're not out for your own interests, you're really out to serve their interests as well. So look, that's probably my biggest learning through the pandemic is people and their values. And I think we got to keep an eye on that at all times.
Makes complete sense. We still have tons of questions pouring in, right? So next one is your thoughts on overall inflation and how should a company prepare and include that in their strategy?
Yeah, and look, that's always a tough one when inflation and your costs are rising more rapidly than you can capture it, right? But I think at the same time, we all have to make sure that we're prepared around what happens in inflation. Now, I'm just going to say this, I'm very, very fortunate. Sumit, you and I talked about this when we were on a prior conversation. I'm very fortunate that I don't have this massive supply chain that is a part of running my business, Duck Creek. We are a software SaaS provider. So my supply chain are my employees. Now, inflation impacts my employees because, look, we want to give good raises and we want to make sure that we're taking care of them in an inflationary environment, of course. But there are stories out there where people's supply chain, parts that are coming in to build cars, these parts are doubling, right? So it's going up very, very rapidly. And so I give that context because compared to some other industries that have massive dependencies on supply chains, we're not the ones that are acutely as impacted by it. Now, we got a great topic. It's a course of IACS that's coming to you on supply chain. So I think that's a great conversation for that. But then for me, companies, they got to model it. They have to be prepared for it. They got to ask themselves, how much can we put on the front end and take some things on rates because we want to make raises on the back end. And then, obviously, I think we're all trying to figure out how much is this going to impact us personally. And that's just, something that we're all assessing in a little bit of a time of unknown.
Perfect. Hey, I'll ask the last question and then we'll close, right? Basically, how do you handle setbacks and remotivate yourself? Anything for our listeners here that they can learn from?
Look, hopefully you could see from I'm a glass is half full kind of guy, kind of person and leader. But trust me, I have been through so many setbacks in my life. And you know what? Here's what I'll tell you. I'll give you one personal setback for me is I got passed over for a promotion one point in my career that I had my heart set on. I got passed over for it. And I was crushed. Like it was like a moment for me. I was like, I can't believe, I can't get to where I want to be. But I think what happened with that promotion, me not getting that promotion, is it led to a variety of different things. And now I find myself down a totally different path and here being the CEO of Duck Creek. And the one thing that, I'll just say to all of you as leaders around setbacks, like if you're all future leaders and work on your leadership team, I just want to say this to you. Your career and your success is not going to be defined by one promotion or one missed promotion or one, a setback that happened to you. Real learning, real genuine learning. And I think you learn a lot about people is in the difficult times when there is a setback, because now you have to rebound and react. I mean, look at what I noted around during the pandemic when everybody was applauding healthcare workers when they were coming out of the hospital and how the world was rallying behind them. And so what I'll just say is it's hard to do in the moment, but if you can find a way to ask yourself genuinely, what can I learn from this? And what new possibilities can come from this? I think you will find yourself saying, you know what? It wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was. And I look back at like kind of that career setback for me, it was actually, it's worked out just fine and great. I would just encourage everybody, please don't take a moment or a setback, look at it as an opportunity. And I think that's when sometimes we actually do our most amazing work, is when we're trying to respond in a very, very difficult time or moment.
Perfect. Hey, Mike, thank you. Thanks for taking the time out today, right? And sharing your real life experiences, your setbacks, right? I could very well relate to the same, and I'm sure the audience had learned a great deal as well. Thank you. On behalf of IACS, right, we just want to thank our corporate sponsors, ITW, Dover Corporation, USG, Nordson, Sonoco, and ChampionX, as well as all the corporations that are supporting us, right? McKinsey, Expedia, Winpack, Duck Creek, and Covanta. Additionally, a big thank you to our advisory board, fellow members of the executive board, and all the volunteers that have made this event happen. Thank you. We do look forward to seeing you in an hour with our next and another exciting session, right, on recruiting and retaining talent with multiple CHROs and head of talent from Exelon, Crocs, Tillamook, and ITW. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate and I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, bye.